Hey, Ben Llewellyn here, and I'm going to talk about where the Welsh language is today and just give a brief overview geographically of and the kind of numbers we're looking at in terms of geography, where and how much. I hope you subscribe and like, whether you just want to learn Welsh, whether you've been learning Welsh, or whether you're curious about it, or whether you speak Welsh but you don't have anyone around you to speak it with. You need to be able to speak with people in a language in order to keep it up, in order to progress, and in order to develop a kind of character in a language. You need fellow speakers. So what about Welsh? Where is it spoken? Well, it's spoken in Wales, and it's spoken in communities in England and in Argentina, but there's other places around the world where you can find people and societies which do speak the language. So let's start outside of Wales and work our way inward to the Bro Gymraeg, or the area where Welsh-speaking communities are dominant. Okay, so Argentina. In 1865, I have this book here, the Welsh sent a ship to Argentina and to a place called Gwendraeth in the south in Patagonia and what is now called Eisteddfod. And they were feeling a bit oppressed in Wales by the English, so they decided to set up a Welsh community and set up their own schools and local government run through the medium of Welsh down in that part of the world. And they found it along the Chabot River Valley and mainly around the Cymru, the River Cymru, in a town called Cwm, which is where most of the people who speak it in Argentina do speak it today. If you want to go to that point, if you're in anywhere of the South American sphere and you want to actually meet people who speak Welsh, you can go to that part of the world. There's a few thousand, it's not many, because in 1880 the Argentinian government made Spanish the language of everything basically and actively suppressed many other languages. Now that period of Argentinian history is coming to an end and people are promoting the Welsh language again. They have two Eisteddfods, or Welsh language cultural festivals, a year in this part of Argentina, and it'd be a great thing to experience that if you're looking to embrace Welsh culture and language. Outside of Argentina, you can go to North America. There were several Welsh-speaking communities and attempts at making colonies in this part of the world. The most prominent, perhaps, is Pennsylvania Welsh Society. They hold festivals as well, and you can find people who do speak Welsh, especially if you're living in Pennsylvania, where there were coal pits and mining communities which did speak Welsh. You also had people in Vermont as well. But there are communities, Welsh societies across the United States in various places. I will list this below, and as well information on Eisteddfod in Argentina, so that you can find these resources if you need to. And there's also communities in Chicago and Toronto where people do speak the language or have knowledge of it, and if you want to practice with them, I'm sure they'd be very happy to do what they can. And there's also the academic facility at Harvard University. I'll put a link to that below. There may be ways to get in touch with people there who speak Welsh. There's also colleges or universities in the American sense in Ohio and I believe Texas, where I'm from frankly, and they have resources and people who speak Welsh. I'll put that below if I can find that for you. Now, still within the New World in a sense, going to New Zealand and Australia, you have communities there. There are Eisteddfods in Australia, but they're not really Welsh speaking per se. You may be able to find people in New South Wales and New Zealand. If I can find any of that for you, I'll put it down below. Now, outside of the New World and the newly explored continents, going back to proper civilization in the old world, You have facilities, academic facilities in Berlin, Leipzig, Paris, where people would be able to hold a conversation in Welsh. This is not going to be a community language, of course, in France or Germany, but if you need, I'm sure that there are people, a small few in these academic facilities who can hold a conversation with you. Now, to the British Isles, where Welsh is from, of course, there are over 100,000 people in England who speak Welsh, because there's a lot of emigration into England for economic reasons, also familial reasons and cultural reasons of Welsh, or the Cymru, the Welsh-speaking Welsh. And they have, over the centuries, built many communities in England. There are chapels. BBC presenter Hugh Edwards has noted about the Welsh-speaking London community and the chapels, and you can find people who speak Welsh through that if you're interested. There's also a Welsh-speaking school in London where people raise their children in Welsh, and you can find teachers and staff and pupils in this area of London who are Welsh speaking. You also have Cwm Gwendraeth near Greyfriars in a central bit of London, and this is the Welsh London Centre. And I went there when I was learning a bit of Welsh to start with. I met one of my great friends there, and he and I still converse over a decade later. And they hold match days for rugby, they hold courses like I went to, they hold cultural tasters and stuff, and this Cwm Gwendraeth, or Welsh London Centre, is very much a beating heart of the Welsh community in London, and I would very much suggest visiting it if you have interest in Welsh language and culture, or learning about the language, or wanting to speak it. And I'll put the address of that below and information on how to contact with them. If you're perhaps studying at universities in England, perhaps Cambridge, Oxford, Bristol, Liverpool, Manchester, these universities do have Welsh societies and people which you can get in touch with. I, in my time studying in England, did get in touch with these groups, and it's important, and you can find Welsh speakers through them if you are studying at these institutions. I think Edinburgh as well. If I do find that, I'll list that all below, the links to all of those societies that I can find for you there. As far as other Welsh-speaking communities, there are some border towns, especially in Shropshire, where Welsh is spoken, and in Herefordshire as well. And many of the place names along the border are very Welsh, or actually are Welsh rather than English, and you can find people there. There's even, I think there's a Welsh-speaking business, I think in Oswestry. If I can find that, I'll link that below. But moving into Wales proper, you do really have two stark regions, and that is the Bro Gymraeg, or the Welsh-speaking territories, where Welsh is the de facto community language of everyday use, and the other parts of Wales which have a varying grade of bilingualism. These are pretty much the northwest, and the central west is very Welsh-speaking, and the east and south is quite English-speaking. But there are pockets within this non-Bro Gymraeg regions in which you can find Welsh-speaking communities and people, and here are a few of them. In Wrecsam you have a pub called Eisteddfod, and I'll put a link down to this below if you're in Wrecsam, because it's a vibrant hub for the Welsh language there, and it's important. They hold events, they hold gatherings for the Welsh language, and hopefully post-corona they'll still be open. So moving on from Eisteddfod, you have something called Menter Iaith in every region of Wales, which translates as language venture, and this is helped by the Welsh government as a way of promoting the language in all parts of Wales. And if you come and talk to these people, in your area, no matter where you are in Wales, you'll be able to find events, perhaps musical gigs, groups, reading groups perhaps, and various activities in the Welsh language. In the urban south, Caerdydd or Cardiff, you have increasingly communities who are grouped around educational primary and secondary schools which speak Welsh. So you have Tregana, which is a part of Caerdydd or Cardiff, and it's about 20% Welsh speaking. That's quite a significant number, although they're kind of diluted amongst a medium-sized city which speaks English mostly. But you have places like Chapter in Caerdydd, which you can find Welsh speakers there, and there's billboards with activities and stuff if you want to speak the language. There's also a group called Cymru, although they do get a bit political with some things. They do have activism regarding promoting the language and helping you find communities, and you can get in touch with them. I'll give them a link below, to which you can find pretty much anywhere in Wales other Welsh speakers and activities of a more alternative kind in some senses, especially good for youth, I think, which can help you promote that. And speaking of youth, there's the Urdd, which I'll put a link down below, which is to immerse children in the language and give them something extracurricular, something more than school. It helps build onto the Eisteddfod, which that's another one which travels a lot. I'll put that in the link below as well. So you have various groups around Wales, and you can find Welsh speakers in that sense. Across the valleys, you're going to find many people whose families spoke Welsh and they lost it due to the anglicised educational system. And there are people who can get by in a few words. There's varying degrees of bilingualism. I think Meredith Hopwood said bilingualism is a spectrum, or fluency in the language is a spectrum. If you know a few words officially, you're bilingual. Now, I don't know how much I personally agree with that, but it is true that if you know a few words, you already have a step foot into the language. And there are going to be people across Wales, no matter where you are, who at least know a few words like Diolch Thank, and you can find people in varying degrees across Wales if you use it. Now, as far as being the community language, it really begins moving west into Carmarthenshire. You can find communities, Cwm Gwendraeth, where you can get by in Welsh if you're looking for it. You do have to kind of know where to go, and if you speak to locals, I'm sure that they'd be happy to help you. They're very friendly in the valleys. They're good people. From Srgar into Ceredigion, you do get more Welsh-speaking communities as you go north and west toward Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth has a lot of students from England, and what you see along the coast is holiday homes and holiday makers, and the tourist industry is damaging the Welsh-speaking culture, whilst at the same time offering it economic jobs, albeit jobs of low quality in many cases. So you have an anglicised frontier along the coast in many senses, and then the inner land, upland in the mountains is quite Welsh speaking. But as you move north towards Machynlleth, which is just in Powys, just south of Gwynedd, the northern part of Ceredigion, you do get more Welsh speaking communities, especially going north past Diolch, and these are really the heartlands of the Welsh language. These are farming communities, but you do have areas like Nant Gwrtheyrn on Clun, which is basically a small village per se, constructed to facilitate immersion in the Welsh language and Welsh learners. And I'll put a link down to Nant Gwrtheyrn below. That's a very good resource to immerse yourself in the Welsh language. And the agricultural sector around Nant Gwrtheyrn is entirely Welsh speaking. You have excellent pubs in the region of Nant Gwrtheyrn or Clun, like Vic, which is in Cleethfine, I think it's the oldest community-owned pub in Europe, if I'm correct. So that's quite a feat, and you're gonna run into that pub. I'd be surprised if you hear English in that pub at all. Sometimes it's a great place and the people are very welcoming. If you just make an effort to speak the local language, they're gonna be very nice to you. If you're going up from the Clun and then up into the mountains around below the southern flank of Eryri, Snowdonia, Eryri is the proper name. Blanefistiniog is very, very Welsh, and there are pubs there that you can go and immerse yourself in the language quite easily. Cafes, bookshops, they'll be happy to speak to you in Welsh. On the other side of Eryri, the mountains, and you go down into what's called Arfon, you have Caernarfon, which is I'd say the most densely Welsh-speaking town in the world as far as poblogaeth or population and the number of people in a small vicinity which expect Welsh being the dominant language. And there's pubs, there's restaurants there, and you'll have no problem whatsoever practicing, using, hearing, speaking Welsh in Caernarfon, and it's a wonderful place. I do suggest it. It's a must really if you're a new Welsh speaker. You have to go to Caernarfon and use that Welsh. You have areas in that area of Caernarfon like Avel and Heli, which is quite Welsh speaking. Moving towards Bangor to the university, it has brought a lot of English students in, which has anglicized the area, and it's been anglicized due to English medium education over the centuries and the ecclesiastical center. But you will find Welsh speakers in bucket loads in Bangor if you know where to look, and you will hear it on the street because the areas around it are so Welsh speaking, especially going up from it into Dyffryn Ogwen in Bethesda, which I think is the most easterly settlement of a predominantly Welsh speaking area, and it's in Gwynedd on the western side of the Cynydda. What the mountains are called, the Cynydda, and that's a great place. You go to any of the pubs along the high street or any of the community activities there, and it's going to be Welsh speaking, and you won't have a problem immersing yourself in the language in Bethesda. On the island, Ynys Môn, to use the proper name, the periphery of the island has been quite eroded by anglicizing second homes, a very aggressive tourist industry which has been quite hostile toward the Welsh language at times. But the interior of the island is quite heavily Welsh speaking, and you go to places like Llangefni and Llymerpwll, PG. I'm not going to try and say the whole thing because it's a tourist gimmick, frankly. And you will find Welsh speakers there in bucket loads as well, and you won't have a problem using it. And even if you're on the periphery of Ynys Môn, Pumaris, Rhosneger, you'll find Welsh speakers, and it's not going to be that much of a problem. Amlwch in the north on the periphery is quite Welsh speaking as well, and you're going to hear it very often, and it's a pleasant thing to hear. Moving east from Gwynedd, you do kind of get a bit of the overspill from Liverpool, and it's been anglicized unfortunately. But in the south of the county, I was trying to think of the English word, it's heavily Welsh speaking, and even in places like Conwy and Llandudno, you can go into shops and use it, and in official functions you're not going to have a problem interacting with local government in Welsh at all. In fact, local government, you can interact via the Welsh language at any place you're at in Wales. Receptionists in hospitals and local government institutions are across the board, and generally, not in every single situation, but generally the face of government is going to be able to converse with you in Welsh if you need help. So that's one thing to remember if you're coming into Wales and wanting to learn more about the language. Well, I hope this has been a help to you to understand the geography of the Welsh language and where you can go to speak it. And if you need any resources, I'm putting a lot below there for you. Okay? Well, I hope you subscribe and like, and we'll see you in the next video.